If someone had told me a child would stop my wedding with a whisper, I would have laughed. But that was the moment my entire world cracked. The church was too quiet, the kind of silence that doesn't belong in a place filled with people, the kind that presses against your chest and makes you aware of every breath you take, every heartbeat you can't control. And I stood there at the altar in a tailored black suit that cost more than most people's cars, staring at a future I had already decided was the safest choice, not the right one. Because men like me don't marry for love. We marry for stability, for alliances, for control, and Victoria Hale was perfect for that, flawless even. Her white dress catching the golden light from the chandeliers above. Her smile measured, practiced, beautiful in a way that felt almost too precise, like a painting you admire but never quite trust, and the officiant's voice droned on about commitment and forever while I barely listened, my attention drifting to the subtle details around me. The shifting weight of my security team near the doors, the way certain guests avoided eye contact, the quiet hum of a city that never really sleeps even on a day like this, because power doesn't pause, not even for a wedding. And just as I opened my mouth to speak the words everyone expected, the words that would seal a decision I had made weeks ago without hesitation, I felt it, something small, unexpected, a tug at my hand, not forceful, not urgent, just there, and I looked down, more out of instinct than concern, and saw her, a little girl, maybe 6 or 7, standing too close to the altar, where she didn't belong, her small fingers wrapped around mine like she had every right to be there, her dress slightly wrinkled, her hair not perfectly brushed like the other children in the room, and her eyes didn't match the rest of her. They were too steady, too aware, like she understood something no one else did. And before I could say a word, before anyone could pull her away, she leaned in just enough for only me to hear. Her voice soft, almost lost in the silence, but clear, in a way that cut through everything. "Stop," she's scamming. "You." And time didn't slow down like people say it does. It stopped completely, every sound, every movement, every expectation in that room froze in place as if the entire world had been waiting for that exact sentence to be spoken. And I didn't react the way anyone expected. I didn't pull my hand away. I didn't call for security. I didn't laugh it off like it was some kind of childish mistake. I just looked at her, really looked, searching for hesitation, for confusion, for anything that would tell me she didn't understand the weight of what she had just said. But there was nothing, only certainty, quiet and unshaken. And when I lifted my gaze from her to Victoria, standing just a few feet away, I saw it. Not fear, not panic, just a flicker, barely there, gone in less than a second. But I've built my entire life on noticing things that don't belong, and that flicker didn't belong. And in that moment, I made a decision that would unravel everything. "Stop the ceremony," I said, my voice calm, controlled, carrying across the room without effort. And the silence that followed wasn't confusion anymore. It was tension, sharp and immediate, because people like me don't change decisions at the altar, not without a reason. And as the room shifted, as whispers began to ripple through the crowd, as my security moved subtly into position without needing orders, I felt the small hand still holding mine, steady, unafraid, like she knew exactly what she had just set in motion. And for the first time in a long time, I realized something I don't usually allow myself to consider. Maybe I wasn't the one in control of this moment. Maybe she was. The silence did not break. It tightened, like the entire room was holding its breath, waiting for me to correct myself, to laugh, to wave it off as a misunderstanding. But I did not move, and neither did the girl, her small hand still wrapped around mine, as if she had anchored herself to the only person who could decide what happened next. And across from me, Victoria's smile returned, perfectly timed, perfectly controlled. The kind of smile that reassures a crowd before it convinces the man standing in front of her. "Alexander," she said, softly, just loud enough for those closest to hear, her tone calm, almost amused. "She is just a child. Someone should take her back to her parents." But I did not look at her. Not yet, because I have learned something over the years. When the room starts speaking for you, it means the truth is about to get buried. And I do not like buried things. I slowly lowered my gaze again to the girl, studying her face, the steadiness in her breathing, the way she did not glance around for approval or fear consequences. She was not guessing. She was not confused. She was certain, And certainty like that does not come from imagination. It comes from knowing. What is your name? I asked, my voice quieter now, but somehow heavier, and she answered without hesitation, Lily. Just Lily. No last name. No explanation, and I nodded once, processing that, before asking the only question that mattered. Why would you say that? And for the first time, her grip tightened slightly, not out of fear, but out of urgency, like she was trying to make sure I listened carefully. Because she lied, she said, her voice still soft, but the words landed harder than anything shouted in that room. And behind me, I could hear the subtle shift of movement, my men adjusting positions, not reacting, just preparing, because they knew me well enough to recognize that I had already crossed a line internally, that I was no longer standing at an altar. I was standing at the edge of a problem, and problems are what I solve. Slowly, deliberately, I lifted my head and finally met Victoria's eyes again, holding her gaze longer this time, searching, not for guilt, but for cracks, and there it was again, that same flicker, smaller now, controlled, but real. She is a child, Victoria repeated, her voice firmer this time, the edge of insistence slipping through. She does not understand what she is saying. And I almost agreed, almost let logic take over, because it would be easy, it would be clean, it would allow everything to continue exactly as planned. But something about the way Lily stood there, unmoving, unafraid, made that option feel wrong, and I have ignored that feeling. Before it has cost me, so I did not ignore it now. Instead, I turned slightly, just enough for my head of security to catch my eye. No words, no gestures, just a look, and he understood immediately. A quiet signal passed through the room like a ripple no one else could see. Phones checked, messages sent, information already being pulled from places most people do not even know exist, all without interrupting the illusion of a wedding. Because that is how power works. It moves without being seen. We will take a moment, I said finally, addressing the room with the same calm authority that had built everything I owned. No one leaves. And that was not a request. I felt Lily's hand relax slightly, like she had been waiting for that exact decision. And as the whispers around us grew louder, as the carefully constructed perfection of the day began to unravel thread by thread, I realized something that settled deep in my chest. This was no longer about a ceremony. It was about a truth that had just walked in, uninvited. And for the first time, I was not sure if I was ready for what it might reveal. The room did not move, but everything inside it shifted, alliances recalculating in silence, attention sharpening. Because when I say no one leaves, people understand it is not about control. It is about truth being locked in place until it shows itself. And I could feel it now. Beneath the polished smiles and expensive fabric, something was off. Something had been off long before this moment. I just had not needed to look closely until now. And that was my mistake. I turned slightly, positioning myself between Lily and the rest of the room without making it obvious. A subtle adjustment, but deliberate, and she noticed. I could tell by the way her shoulders relaxed just enough to give away trust, not fear. Trust, which raised a different kind of question entirely. Because children do not trust men like me without a reason. Stay here, I said quietly to her, and she nodded, like she understood more than she should. And that feeling again, that quiet wrongness, grew stronger. Alexander. Victoria stepped closer, her heels echoing softly against the marble floor, controlled, measured, every movement, calculated to regain attention. This is unnecessary, she said, lowering her voice just enough to make it sound personal, intimate, like she was trying to bring me back into a private moment. But I did not follow her tone. I stayed exactly where I was, watching her, not as a man about to marry her, but as a man evaluating a variable that no longer fit the equation. Unnecessary things do not usually interrupt my decisions, I replied, calm, even, and for a fraction of a second, she hesitated. Not visibly to anyone else, but I saw it, the slight delay before her next breath, the recalibration. And that was enough to confirm what I was starting to suspect. This was not about a misunderstanding. This was about something hidden, and hidden things always leave traces. Tell me something, I continued, my voice still steady. When did we first meet? It was a simple question, harmless on the surface, but it carried weight, because the answer should have been immediate, effortless. Something real people remember without thinking. Victoria smiled again, softer this time, almost nostalgic. At the charity gala in Manhattan, 2 years ago, she said without pause. And it was a perfect answer, the correct answer, the one anyone who knew our story would give. And yet something about it felt rehearsed, not wrong, just practiced, like a line delivered too cleanly. And before I could respond, Lily spoke again. Her voice small, but cutting through the air with the same quiet certainty. That is not true, she said, and the shift this time was not subtle. It moved through the room like a ripple people could actually feel, a tightening of posture, a collective awareness that something deeper was unfolding. I looked down at her again, narrowing my focus. What do you mean? I asked, and she hesitated for the first time, not out of fear, but as if she was choosing her words carefully, like she understood the consequences of saying them out loud. She met you before that, Lily said slowly, her eyes lifting to meet mine, unwavering. But she used a different name, and that was it. Not a dramatic accusation, not a detailed explanation, just a single shift in truth that changed everything, because names matter, identities matter, and if that was real, if that was even partially true, then everything I had built this decision on was standing on unstable ground. I did not look at Victoria immediately this time. I let the silence stretch, let the weight of the accusation settle, because truth has a way of revealing itself in the space people try to fill too quickly, and I wanted to see if she would fill it, if she would rush to correct it, deny it, reshape it. But she did not speak right away, and that silence told me more than any answer could have. Behind me, I heard the faint vibration of a phone, my signal coming back faster than expected, information already moving toward me, pieces of a story I had not realized I was part of until now. And as I finally turned my head to look at Victoria again, really look this time, I realized something that made the air feel heavier, colder, sharper. I was not standing in a ceremony anymore. I was standing in the middle of a lie that had just started to unravel, and the only question left was how far it went. The vibration in my pocket stopped as quickly as it began, replaced by a quiet certainty that the answers were already on their way. And I have learned to trust that timing, because information does not rush unless it has something urgent to reveal. I did not reach for my phone immediately. I let the silence continue, let the weight of Lily's words settle deeper into the room, because truth, when left alone for just a few seconds, has a way of making people uncomfortable enough to expose themselves. And Victoria finally moved again, not forward this time, but slightly to the side, a subtle shift in position that created distance without appearing defensive. This is getting out of hand, she said, her tone still controlled. But there was something sharper underneath now, something that had not been there before. You are allowing a stranger to question everything in front of your guests. And there it was, not denial, not clarity, just redirection, and I recognized it immediately, because I have used it myself more times than I can count. When the truth is inconvenient, you shift the focus. You make the situation the problem instead of the fact. But I was not interested in the situation anymore, only the fact. She is not questioning everything, I said quietly, my gaze fixed on her. She is questioning one thing. And I let that hang in the air before finishing, your identity. And that word landed differently, heavier, more precise, because identity is not something people misremember. It is something they build, protect, and sometimes hide. Victoria's eyes held mine, steady, unwavering. But her breathing changed, just slightly, enough for me to notice, and that was all I needed to confirm that whatever Lily had said had reached somewhere real. Alexander, she said again, softer now, almost pleading, you know me. And that sentence should have been enough. It should have closed the gap, restored control, but it did the opposite, because I realized in that moment that knowing someone and believing you know someone are not the same thing, and I had never taken the time to question the difference. A soft chime echoed from behind me, barely audible to anyone else, but clear to me. My signal. I reached into my jacket slowly, deliberately, pulling out my phone without breaking eye contact with Victoria, and as the screen lit up, I saw it. A file already opened, already summarized, already pointing towards something I had not expected to see today. A name, not Victoria Hale, something else, something older, something buried under layers of carefully constructed detail. I did not react outwardly. I have spent too many years training myself not to. But inside, the shift was immediate, cold, precise, final. I lowered the phone slightly, just enough to confirm what I was looking at, then slipped it back into my pocket like it meant nothing, because power is not about showing what you know, it is about deciding when to reveal it. You are right, I said calmly, and for a moment, relief flickered across Victoria's face, quick, hopeful, misplaced. I do know you, I continued, taking a step forward, closing the distance between us just enough to change the energy of the space, but not as well as I thought. And the room reacted this time, not loudly, not dramatically, but in the subtle ways people do when they realize something important is happening. A shift in posture, a pause in breathing, an awareness that the script has changed. Lily's hand was still in mine, steady, grounding, like she had known this would happen all along. And I realized something else then, something that settled deeper than the rest. This was not just about Victoria anymore. This was about how long the truth had been hidden in plain sight, and how easily I had accepted it without question. One more thing, I said, my voice cutting through the tension with quiet authority. What was your name before? And this time, there was no immediate answer, no perfect response, no practiced line delivered without thought, just silence, real silence, the kind that confirms everything you need to know before a single word is spoken. And in that silence, I understood the truth had already arrived, even if no one else in the room was ready to hear it. Victoria did not answer immediately, and that was the answer, because people who have nothing to hide do not need time to think. They respond, instinctively, naturally, without calculating the cost of every word. But she stood there in silence, her eyes still locked on mine, searching for something, an exit, a shift, a way to regain control of a situation that was no longer hers to control. And I let her have those seconds. I let the silence stretch just long enough for everyone in that room to feel it, to recognize it, because doubt is not created by accusation. It is created by hesitation, and hers was unmistakable. Alexander, she finally said, her voice lower now, steadier but heavier. This is not the place for this conversation. And that choice of words, not denial, not clarification, just avoidance, confirmed everything I needed to know. I tilted my head slightly, studying her in a way I had not allowed myself to before, not as a partner, not as a future, but as a question. And questions demand answers, not deflection. It became the place the moment you stopped answering. I replied, my tone unchanged, calm, controlled, but final, and I could feel the shift ripple outward again. The guests no longer pretending this was a temporary interruption, but understanding that something fundamental had changed, that this was no longer a ceremony. It was an unraveling. And behind me, one of my men stepped closer, not enough to draw attention, just enough to quietly confirm what I already knew. Everything had been verified. Everything was real. I did not need to look at him. I did not need the details yet. I only needed the truth in front of me, and it was already speaking, even in silence. Lily's hand moved slightly in mine, and I glanced down at her, just for a moment, and she met my eyes again with that same calm certainty. No fear, no confusion, just trust that I would see this through. And that trust carried weight, more than anything else in that room, because it meant she believed I would choose truth over convenience. And that is not a belief many people have about men like me. I turned back to Victoria, closing the distance another step, enough that my voice did not need to rise, enough that only she could hear the next words clearly. Your name, I said quietly, the real one. And this time, the reaction was immediate, not in words, but in the smallest physical shift, her shoulders tightening, her breath catching just enough to break the rhythm she had maintained all morning. And then she smiled again, but it was different now, not perfect, not controlled, just forced. You are making a mistake, she said, and for the first time, there was something real in her voice, not fear, not yet, but urgency, the kind that comes when someone realizes the story they built is about to collapse. Maybe, I said, holding her gaze without blinking, but it will not be because I ignored the truth. And that was the line, the moment where everything separated into before and after, because once truth is acknowledged, even partially, it cannot be pushed back into silence, and the room felt it, the weight of it settling into every corner, every whispered breath, every watchful eye. And then, Finally, she spoke. Not loudly, not dramatically, just one word, barely above a whisper, but enough, Clara. And it landed heavier than anything else she could have said, because it was not just a name. It was a crack in the identity she had built, a fracture that spread instantly through everything connected to it. I did not react immediately. I let the name exist in the space between us, let it take shape, let it confirm what had already begun to unfold. And behind me, I could feel the shift in my men, the quiet recognition that the situation had moved from suspicion to confirmation. And I realized something then, something simple but absolute. This was never just about deception. It was about intention, about why someone would step into my life under a different name, build trust, stand here now at the edge of becoming something permanent, and all of it based on something that was not real. And as I looked at her, no longer Victoria, but Clara, I understood that the truth I had just uncovered was only the beginning, because people do not lie like this without a reason. And whatever that reason was, it was about to surface whether she wanted it to or not. The name lingered in the air like something fragile and irreversible. Clara, not Victoria, not the woman I had agreed to marry, but someone else entirely. And the moment it left her lips, the illusion shattered in a way no one could ignore. Not the guests, not my men, not even her. Because once a lie is replaced with truth, even a single piece of it, everything built on top of it begins to collapse under its own weight. I watched her carefully, not with anger, not yet, but with a precision that came from years of separating truth from performance. And what I saw now was no longer control. It was calculation trying to survive exposure. Clara, I repeated quietly, testing the name, letting it settle between us, and her eyes flickered again, not denying it, not correcting me, just accepting that there was no way back from this point. That is not the name you gave me. I continued, my voice steady, each word deliberate. And it is not the name attached to the life you showed me. And this time she did not interrupt, she did not attempt to redirect, because she knew, just like I did, that we were no longer discussing perception, we were standing inside the truth, and truth does not bend to convenience. Lily shifted slightly beside me, her hand still in mine, her presence grounding in a way I did not expect, and I glanced down at her again, just briefly, and saw something new, not just certainty, but relief, like she had been waiting for this exact moment, waiting for someone to finally listen. And that realization sharpened everything, because it meant this was not random, this was not coincidence, this was intentional. I turned back to Clara, narrowing the space between us, just enough to make it impossible to hide behind distance. Why? I asked, not loudly, not aggressively, just one word. But it carried more weight than anything else I could have said, because motives matter more than actions, and whatever her reason was, it would define everything that came next. She inhaled slowly, her composure returning in fragments, not whole, but enough to stand, enough to respond. Because you would not have listened otherwise, she said. And that answer was not what I expected, not denial, not manipulation, just truth, uncomfortable and direct. And for a moment, I considered it, not accepting it, but acknowledging that it existed, because people rarely lie without purpose, and when they do, that purpose is rarely simple. You assume a lot about what I would or would not do. I replied, my tone still calm, but colder now, sharper, because assumptions are dangerous when they involve someone like me. She shook her head slightly, her gaze holding mine with a different kind of intensity now, not control, not performance, something closer to urgency. I know enough, she said, and there was something in that statement that did not belong to a stranger, something that suggested familiarity, history, a connection that had not been revealed yet. And that was when the second vibration came, stronger this time, undeniable. I reached for my phone again, slower than before, because I already knew what I was about to see would not be simple. The screen lit up, and this time there was more, not just a name, but a pattern, a timeline, fragments of a past that intersected with mine in ways I had not noticed, not because they were hidden well, but because I had not been looking. And that realization settled deep, colder than anything else, because it meant this was not just about her entering my life under a different identity. It was about how long she had been there without me realizing it. I lowered the phone, my expression unchanged, but everything inside me had shifted, The situation was no longer uncertain. It was structured, layered, intentional, and as I looked at Clara again, I understood something that changed the direction of everything. This was not just a deception meant to take something from me. This was something else, something connected, something personal. And for the first time since this began, I realized the truth I was uncovering was not only about her, it was about me too. The moment stretched longer than it should have, the kind of moment where the air feels heavier, where every second forces something deeper to surface. And I did not look at my phone again because I already knew what it contained. Patterns do not lie. Timelines do not fabricate themselves. And the fragments I had just seen were enough to confirm one thing with absolute clarity. Clara had not entered my life by accident. She had stepped into it with purpose, with direction, with a history that intersected mine long before I ever noticed her. And that realization did not bring anger. It brought something colder, something sharper, awareness. You said I would not have listened, I said slowly, my voice steady, but different now, more focused, more precise. So you created a version of yourself that I would accept. And she did not deny it. She did not even try. Her gaze held mine with that same intensity. But now there was something else beneath it. Not just urgency, not just calculation, something closer to truth finally being allowed to exist. I created the only version that would get close enough, she replied. And that word close enough carried weight, more than she probably intended, because it implied distance, not just physical, but something deeper, something built over time, something that had existed long before this moment. Lily shifted again beside me, and this time she stepped slightly forward. Her small presence, cutting into the space between us in a way that no one dared interrupt. And I realized then that she was not just a witness. She was part of this, connected to it in a way I had not fully understood yet. She did not lie about everything, Lily said quietly, her voice softer now, but still certain, and both of us looked down at her at the same time, an unspoken alignment and a tension that changed the dynamic instantly. Then what did she tell the truth about? I asked, not taking my eyes off the girl. Because sometimes truth comes from the place people underestimate the most. Lily hesitated, not out of fear, but as if she was deciding how much to reveal, how far to push something that was already unfolding faster than anyone expected. She told you who you are, she said finally, and that answer should not have meant anything. It should have been vague, insignificant, but it was not, because it landed in a place that had already started to shift. Inside me, I looked back at Clara, narrowing my focus, and for the first time since this began, I saw something that had not been visible before, not deception, not control, but familiarity, not in the way strangers become known over time, but in the way something once known is recognized again. And that realization hit differently, because it suggested something I had not considered, that this was not just her stepping into my world. This was her returning to it. How long? I asked, my voice quieter now, but heavier, because time changes everything, and whatever answer she gave would redefine every moment that led to this one. Clara exhaled slowly, her composure no longer perfect, but no longer forced either, just real. Long enough to know you would not recognize me, she said. And that was the second fracture, deeper than the first, because it implied a past I had missed, a connection I had overlooked. And I do not overlook things, not like that, not without reason. The room felt different now, less like a place filled with people and more like a space holding a truth that was no longer contained. My men remained still, silent, waiting, because they knew this was no longer just a situation to manage. It was something I needed to understand, and I realized then that everything had shifted again. This was no longer about proving a lie. It was about uncovering a past, one that had been standing in front of me the entire time under a name I chose to trust. And as I looked at Clara, no longer seeing just the deception, but the possibility of something deeper, something unfinished, I understood that whatever came next would not just change this moment. It would change everything I thought I knew about how it all began. The word returning echoed in my mind longer than anything else she had said, not because it was loud, but because it fit too easily into the pieces I had just uncovered. And I have learned to pay attention when something fits too well, because that usually means it has been there longer than I realized. I studied her again, not as Clara, not as Victoria, but as someone I was supposed to recognize, someone I had already known. And that realization did not come all at once. It came in fragments. Small details rising to the surface like something buried too long finally breaking through. The way she held my gaze without flinching. The way she spoke without trying to impress or intimidate. The way her presence felt less like an intrusion and more like something unfinished, something unresolved. And I did not like that feeling. Not because it was unfamiliar, but because it was too familiar in a way I could not immediately place. You expect me to remember something I was never given the chance to see, I said, my voice quieter now, but sharper, because if there was a past here, it was one I had missed entirely, and I do not miss things without a reason. Clara's expression shifted, not defensive, not guarded, just tired, like she had been carrying this moment longer than I had been living it. You saw it, she said softly. You just did not know what you were looking at, and that answer landed differently. Not as a challenge, but as a statement, and statements like that do not come from assumption. They come from experience. Lily stepped slightly closer to me again, her presence no longer just steady, but intentional, like she understood this was the part that mattered most, the part where truth stopped hiding and started revealing itself. You left, Lily said quietly, her voice softer than before, but carrying something heavier now, something that did not belong to a child speaking about the present, but someone recalling the past. And that was the moment everything shifted again, not in the room, not in the tension, but inside me, because those words did not belong to this situation. They belonged to something else, something older, something I had not thought about in years, something I had chosen not to remember, and I felt it before I fully understood it. That pull, that subtle recognition that starts before the memory itself. I looked at Clara again, searching now, not for lies, not for cracks, but for confirmation, for something that would anchor this feeling into something real. And she did not look away. She did not try to redirect. She just stood there, letting me see what I had not allowed myself to see before. Where? I asked, the word leaving my mouth before I could stop it, because once a question like that forms, it does not disappear. It demands an answer. Clara inhaled slowly, her composure steady now, not because she was controlling it, but because she no longer needed to. Brooklyn, she said, and the name hit harder than it should have, not because of what it was, but because of what it unlocked. A street I had not walked in years, a building I had not thought about, a version of myself that existed. Before everything I had built, before the suits, before the power, before the control, and suddenly the fragments aligned, not perfectly, not completely, but enough to form something recognizable, something real. And I realized then that this was not just about her stepping into my life under a different name. This was about a past I had left behind, a past that had not left me. And as I stood there, in a place that was supposed to mark a new beginning, I understood that what had just surfaced was not just the truth about her. It was the truth about where everything actually started. And for the first time since this began, I was not just questioning her identity, I was questioning my own memory of who I had been before I became the man everyone in this room thought they knew. Brooklyn did not just echo, it pulled, like a thread I had cut years ago suddenly tightening around something I could no longer ignore. And the memory did not return all at once. It came in flashes, incomplete, uneven, but enough to make my chest feel heavier than it had a moment ago. A narrow street, late afternoon light bouncing off old brick. A girl standing near a corner store, younger, quieter, watching everything like she did not belong but refused to leave. And I remembered passing by, not stopping, not asking, because back then I did not stop for anything that did not serve a purpose. And that realization hit harder than anything Clara had said, because it was not about what she did, it was about what I did not do. I exhaled slowly, grounding myself in the present, in the weight of the room, in the silence that had not broken since the truth began unfolding. And when I looked at her again, I did not see a stranger anymore. I saw someone who had been there long before I decided who I was going to become. You were there, I said quietly. Not a question, not anymore. And she nodded. Once, small, but enough. And that was all it took for the rest of it to fall into place. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough to understand the shape of it. The beginning of something I had never finished. Lily's hand slipped slightly in mine, not pulling away, just adjusting, like she no longer needed to hold on as tightly. And I looked down at her again, really looked this time, not just at the certainty in her eyes, but at the familiarity I had missed before, the way her gaze held mine without hesitation, the quiet strength that did not belong to a child unless it had been learned. And that was when it connected, not as a thought, but as a realization that settled deep and final. She is not just telling me the truth, I said, my voice low, almost to myself. She is part of it. Clara did not interrupt, did not correct me, because she knew I had reached the point where the truth no longer needed to be explained. It only needed to be accepted. And the room, the guests, the ceremony, all of it faded into something distant, irrelevant, because none of it mattered compared to what had just surfaced. I let go of the structure of the moment, the expectation, the plan, and stepped back, not away from them, but away from everything that had been built on something incomplete. The ceremony is over, I said calmly, not raising my voice, not needing to, because the authority behind it was absolute. And this time, there was no confusion, no hesitation, just quiet acceptance as the reality of it settled into every person present. My men moved subtly, guiding the room without disruption, maintaining order without force, because that is how things are handled when control is not lost, just redirected. I turned back to Clara, to Lily, to the truth standing in front of me. And for the first time since this began, I made a choice that was not based on power, not on strategy, but on something I had not allowed myself to prioritize in a long time. Understanding. You are going to tell me everything, I said, my tone no longer cold, no longer sharp, just certain, and Clara nodded, not because she had to, but because she had been waiting for that moment, waiting for me to finally ask the right question instead of accepting the wrong answers. Lily looked up at me one more time, her expression softer now, lighter, like something heavy had finally been set down. And as I looked between them, I understood something that no deal, no alliance, no carefully planned future had ever given me. Control does not come from knowing everything. It comes from choosing to face the truth when it finally finds you. And that day, in a room meant for promises, a child did not just stop a mistake. She gave me something I had not realized I lost, the chance to see clearly before it was too late.